All right, to get more insight on this, we're joined now by Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix, Dr. Azar Jammine. Dr. Jammine, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I know I've read out the definitions, but in layman's terms, what should you understand has now happened to your retirement?
In layman's terms, what it really means is that if you've got a retirement fund, you are now entitled to access a third of it straight away and obviously pay tax on that. But you are obliged to keep 2/3 of it in that retirement fund until you actually retire. You cannot touch that money any longer. So it's a way of, there was a lot of pressure, especially during COVID, when people were feeling the strain of job losses or for that matter, salary cuts. There was a feeling that they wanted to access money that was owing to them in their retirement funds as soon as possible. Now, clearly, that's not the whole point of having a retirement fund, which is really to help you once you actually stop working. But what the government did as a compromise was develop this system whereby workers could access a third of their retirement fund immediately and leave the remainder in that retirement fund until they actually retired.
And should we appreciate government's legislative changes as being better for us when we reach retirement age?
I think so, most definitely, because the whole point about retirement funds is to enable you to survive decently after you actually retire. And if you're still busy working and you and you access those retirement funds while you're still working, then what will be left when you stop working? It's a very short-sighted approach by workers. It's not easy for anyone to really save under most circumstances, and there needs to be a recognition that the way for longer-term prosperity or longer-term ability to survive is to actually save while you're busy earning and be able to reap the benefits to sustain you after you've stopped earning. And by wanting to access all your retirement funds before you end your working life, I think you are jeopardizing your ability to survive when you stop working.
Just in terms of people who are not within the government systems, they are not affected, but as I mentioned earlier on, that some critics are saying this particular law is not taking into account the improvements or innovative ways that people are saving. Can you talk us through that?
Yes, of course. I mean, one isn't obliged to put away everything that one earns, that one doesn't need when one is earning, into a retirement fund. You can choose all sorts of other forms of investment that some of which are more, some of which are less tax efficient than putting your money into retirement funds. But in its wisdom over many years, not only this government but previous governments actually made it obligatory to, in many circumstances, to set aside a certain percentage of the income that you earn into a pension fund or a provident fund. And that still remains in place. I suppose you could argue whether it should be obligatory, but again, it's a system that has been developed supposedly for the interest of the man in the street who is working and needs to look after his longer-term well-being after he stops working.
It doesn't government automatically do that in a way, especially through the tax system? If you are paying taxes, you are somehow penalized if you don't have a retirement fund that is seen as adequate.
Well, the beauty about these pension or provident funds, retirement annuities, is that so long as you invest in them, you are not, those funds are not taxed whilst they are invested in those funds. It's only when you withdraw money from those funds that you start paying tax. So in the interim, you've got the ability to use pre-tax money to accumulate and compound in a fund without being taxed on it until such time as you start wanting to actually withdraw that tax, presumably after withdraw that benefit, presumably after you retire.
So just given the current inflationary pressures, the high interest rates, and those are not going to abate anytime soon, I think from what predictions are that we're looking at more towards the end of the year, even though we're seeing a much more dovish approach, monetary policy from the Fed, and we often somehow do end up copying it to an extent. But is it an easy environment for South Africans to save?
It's not an easy environment in which to save, but then one must recognize that if you don't save, there will be nothing left when you grow old. And the majority of South Africans need to understand that, that if you want to have a decent life in your old age, you've got to have made sure that you've saved enough, even though it's a very tough environment in which to save. But unfortunately, South Africans, and here I'm generalizing, but there is a proclivity for South Africans to keep consuming more than they should be, and to leave very little left for a future date. And that is not a sustainable way of sustaining a decent life, a reasonable lifestyle.
So
it means that a lot of people are ending up totally impoverished in their old age.
So if you haven't done so, what kind of retirement annuity fund should you be looking for?
Well, retirement annuities you can take out all the way until, retirement age, which is officially 55. In these instruments, and I think it's a very effective way of actually saving money.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix, Dr. Azar Jammine.